Welcome to Weekends with Whitney. Today's show is all about Avery Island, home of the world-famous Tabasco sauce and some of the most unique plants and wildlife you can see in Louisiana. Meet the botanist, whose 2 years of work curating specimens of plant life has revealed plants here not found in any other place in America.
There wasn't anything McIlhenny didn't attempt and work with. And of course, they were so well connected. You know, he was friends with the Roosevelts and with Fairchild at the Smithsonian. So many things came this way because of all those connections.
But of the thousands of plants imported by McIlhenny to Avery Island, this is his most famous. The capsicum pepper, the key ingredient in the original Tabasco hot sauce. See how they've been able to deliver a world of flavor around the globe. But first, Tabasco celebrates its 150th year this year. We sit down with the 6th generation of McIlhenny's who have taken this company worldwide. Here on Avery Island, Edmund McIlhenny sowed the seeds for his first commercial pepper crop in 1868. Family has been at the root of it ever since. John Simmons is the first of the 6th generation of McIlhenny's to work in the business.
My great-great-great-grandfather, Edmund McIlhenny, when he was later on in life in the 1890s, he dictated a memoir to his daughters in which he mentions everything about his life, growing up in New Orleans, being a banker, living on Avery Island. He makes no mention of Tabasco sauce, and yet today it is his enduring legacy. And I think that's extraordinary because you look at what our family and everybody here on Avery Island has been able to do for the last 150 years. You think about all the meals we've been able to be a part of and all the meals we hope we get to be a part of across the next 150 years. I think it's pretty extraordinary.
The pepper plant used for that first bottle of Tabasco is family too.
The plants that we're growing today are the ancestor to that.
Exactly where that first plant came from is still a mystery.
All of the world's spicy red chili pepper, all of it comes from somewhere in the Amazon basin. Folks don't know exactly where, but somewhere in the Amazon basin, Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, somewhere in there is the highest point of genetic diversity of capsicum. We don't know quite how the Tabasco pepper, which is Capsicum frutescens variety Tabasco, made its way up through to Avery Island, Louisiana. And that's one of those bits of family lore where we have some family stories, but we can't really confirm the veracity of those family stories. But we know that Edmund liked it, and we know that Edmund started cultivating it.
It was one of hundreds of plants Edmund cultivated. He was an avid gardener and a lover of great food. During the Civil War, the family fled Avery Island. Union troops burned all of the sugarcane and most of the other crops. But still growing after the war, when the McIlhenny family returned, his capsicum pepper plants.
When he returned to Avery Island in 1865, next to his greenhouse, so says family legend, was growing a plant. And Tabasco today, the Tabasco plant today, it's a tough little plant. One of the things, it's an heirloom. We haven't changed it, we haven't done anything to it. It's like an heirloom tomato, but it's hardy, it's tough.
For 2 years, he made the pepper sauce for himself.
It was truly, I'm going to make something good to make my food taste better than it already does.
Aging was accidental.
And it was quite by accident that he discovered the longer he let it sit, the better it tasted, the better the flavor got, the more it got sort of a dark, rich red color. That was all kind of by accident, but he discovered it and he kept it because it made it taste better.
In 1869, Edmund sold 600 bottles of his hot sauce to grocery stores. A year later, he patented the Tabasco brand. A new VP of Operations, Troy Romero, says paved the way for today's success.
It takes a very special island, a very special sun, and some very special peppers to make the one Tabasco, Tabasco, very original liquid pepper seasoning.
You all done it.
I think the family has done a great job of protecting the brand, from early trademark protection to innovation.
Tabasco was shipping internationally early on.
Some of the first sales were to Great Britain. So back in the 1860s, 1870s.
After World War II, the business ballooned.
We had a big expansion after World War II. If you think about Japan is actually our biggest international market, and if you think about the troops that were there after the war, and they were introducing people to Western food, and you just can't go anywhere in Japan where there's not Tabasco.
Today, they sell Tabasco in 198 countries and territories around the world.
We produce about 12 different sauces here, but when you look at all the different SKUs, because of different coding and different shipper marks, it's over 1,800 that we manufacture here.
There's very few places you can go in the world and not see Tabasco sauce.
Their pepper plants are now grown around the world too.
It started in the middle of the 20th century, but the seed still comes from here. So one of the ways we keep that loop closed is all the seed that we're working with around the globe comes from a crop that we plant annually here on Avery Island. So this year we have about 20 acres. We'll start harvesting it in late August. That will be the seed that we use for next year's production crop. So we'll give it to farmers around the globe. I think it's interesting that, and it's noteworthy, I think, that we give it, and I think that's a distinction that makes a difference to the farmers we work with. They work on guaranteed 2-year contracts at a guaranteed price. One of the neat things about Tabasco, as opposed to some of the more common crops in those part of the world, is it's a crop that's going to flow cash over time. So whereas instead of having a one-time payout and then you got to manage your finances all year, you instead have cash flow over time. And one of the interesting challenges that we've had on the side of the business that I work in is teaching farmers not to be farmers. They're good farmers. They know what they're doing. They know their land. They know their soil. They know their water. It's instead teaching them to be businessmen. Like, okay, you're going to flow money over time. So this is how, these are the ways that you need to make sure you're managing it. And that's been really good and really fruitful for us. We work in many cases with the children and grandchildren of the people that we started with outside the United States in the 50s and 60s.
Yet the only place it's bottled is right here on Avery Island. Half of the company's 200 workers work here in the factory. Between their day and night shifts, they bottle 700 to 800,000 bottles a day.
We stay busy. We've got a lot of great people that do a great job and keep everything running.
Nearly 125 people live on Avery Island in homes built by the company. 25 are family members. The others are employees, like Elias Landry. This has always been home.
I've lived on Avery Island all my life, and I'm 67 years old.
Elias says it was the perfect place to grow up.
We were kind of lucky that we could roam just about anywhere we wanted. I roamed, me and my brothers and some of the older kids that were on the island, we'd roam the woods and just have a good time. I mean, one Christmas, we were so excited because everybody got a little hand axe so that we could go in the woods and chop down a few trees. I mean, we'd cut down bamboos and make pop guns with them.
Avery Island even had its own elementary school back then.
When I first started, it was 2 classrooms, first and second, and then third and fourth, 2 teachers. Later on, they added on another classroom, and hired another teacher. So each teacher taught 2 grades, and one was still the principal, even though she had a classroom of her own.
As they grew older, they also had summer jobs here.
Back in those days, the company would hire a group of boys and during the summer, and 13 was the entry age, and that's when I started.
Elias worked here through college and after.
But I'd still be working part-time, on Saturdays or whenever the school was out. When I graduated, they didn't have any job openings in my field, so I just kept working here, and the boss asked me if I wanted a full-time job. I told him yeah. So been here and ever since.
He says the McIlhenny's made you feel like family.
I don't know how to explain it, but you know, you grow up knowing who they are, respecting who they are. I mean, a lot of them, you know, didn't really demand respect, but when they'd see you, they'd say hi and talk to you and stuff like this. I remember as a kid, Walter McIlhenny was president at the time when I was a little boy. Walter McIlhenny was a retired Marine general, you know. And when he'd be riding around and the kids would see him coming in his car, we'd run up to the side of the road and be saluting, you know. That's the kind of thing, and it was always good to know. Good. It felt like family here.
The company doesn't employ the entire family. Only a select few actually work here.
So the way that it breaks out in the family is this. We've got about 140 members of the McIlhenny family around, but there's only 4 of us in the business. My father, Tony Simmons, is our CEO. He's in the 5th generation. Our executive VP, my boss, my day-to-day boss, is a guy named Harold Osborne. We call him Took. He's also in the 5th generation. There's myself, and then there's Christian Brown. Christian just started in April. He's working through an 18-month training program that sees him. Right now he's working in our blending department, so he's actually making red sauce. Next month he's going to be working actually with our domestic sales force. Then he's going to work in our farms in Latin America. So he's going to be doing everything from the bottom up to learn how it is we make, sell, market, and do the work of having McIlhenny Company and Tabasco brand pepper sauce.
It takes 5 years to create 1 bottle of Tabasco sauce. The peppers are handpicked at the peak of ripeness. That same day, they're ground into a mash with a little salt. Often it's salt from the Avery Islands salt mine.
There's been a salt operation on Avery Island since before the Civil War, today they're mining at like 1,800 and 1,900 feet, something like that. It's pretty extraordinary. It's really cool down there.
Salt not used in the sauce often ends up on the street, literally.
The larger portion of it is actually road salt. So our friends up in the Midwest, when it's snowing, they got to be able to drive to work and stuff, so that's what the salt's for.
No kidding, and I bet they've never thought, that's from Avery Island.
Avery Island.
That was my dinner last
I can't
night.
imagine they have.
The pepper mash is stored in whiskey barrels.
We use repurposed American whiskey or bourbon barrels. It's a nice little thing for us. They can only use them once, so there's this wonderful secondhand market out there for bourbon barrels that we're able to capitalize on and jump into.
The barrels are aged on Avery Island 3 years.
When we age our mash, it really changes. It changes color, it changes flavor, it changes smell. It goes from these like really big, fresh fruit kind of smells to these real mellow, almost like wine. It really would be a nice analog to wine, really mellow, sort of rounded out kind of smells.
After 3 years, the small barrels are pumped into these huge 1,800-gallon oak barrels. Vinegar's added, and it churns for 17 days. It's then strained to remove skins and seeds. Now, it's ready for the bottle.
When you think about our process, it's about 5 years then from start. If it's 3 years in a barrel, then you have a year here on our farm here to get the seed grown out. And then you have another year after we grow it out here before we can, or where it's grown out as a production crop. And then finally 3 years in an oak barrel.
Unless it's their Tabasco Family Reserve or their Diamond Anniversary Reserve.
Family Reserve is going to be made with only Tabasco peppers grown here on Avery Island.
Okay.
And then instead of the 3-year aging process, we're going to age them longer, in some cases up to 7 years, maybe even longer than that. And then we mix it with a white wine vinegar as opposed to our distilled white vinegar. So it's a little sweeter, it's a little darker because of the aging time, it's a little hotter because Avery Island pepper tends to run a little hotter. So it's really good. And then this year, as part of our 150th, celebrating 150, we have a Diamond Reserve product. So this is still Avery Island peppers only. Some of them have been aged up to 15 years. Not everything, but some of them aged up to 15 years. And then it's mixed with a sparkling white wine vinegar because, you know, we're celebrating, we're having a good time. And it's in a bottle that looks a lot like a sparkling wine bottle. It's very special.
So if you know a family member.
If you have a bottle, that's pretty that's pretty serious stuff.
Bottling is a symphony of precision. Original Tabasco red sauce is bottled from 1/8 minis all the way to 1-gallon jugs. Every drop packs a big punch.
Small business, we're just fortunate to have a big brand.
Their brand is a merchandising dream. In their gift store, you can find just about everything made with the Tabasco logo on it, or Tabasco in it, like their raspberry chipotle ice cream, which, by the way, is delicious.
We just want to show people that you can use Tabasco in ways you didn't think you could use it.
People from around the world flock to Avery Island.
So our probably biggest slice of visitors comes from Western Europe. We get a ton of French and German tourists. This year I've had folks from Zimbabwe here on Avery Island. I think some folks from Japan. So we have a large slice of international visitors, and we're very happy about that.
Visitors experience more than ever before an expanded tour of the factory, the 1868 restaurant, and cooking classes from their chef.
We're a food company. We got to feed people, and you don't eat Tabasco by itself. We wish you could. I mean, you can. But we wish you did.
It's usually a dare.
Normally, if you're doing that, it's a dare. But so we wanted to have a place where people could come, have some great food that is already made with Tabasco brand pepper sauce. It's already included in the recipes, and they can customize and add their own. And you know, maybe they find a new favorite. Maybe they change their palate a little bit, and that's great.
Tabasco's everywhere, from U.S. soldiers' MREs to astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
And we're proud to share Louisiana cuisine with the world.
It's a company rooted in tradition, but still trying new things.
It is a real pleasure to get to do this every day. Not only is making pepper sauce fun, but food's fun. Food unites people. It really brings people together. Cocktails, which Tabasco has a role in as well, not just Bloody Marys, but if you think about the changing face of cocktails, and how cocktail cultures come back and spicy cocktails are in right now. Those are all fun things, so it's neat to be involved in it. It's really an honor, you know, and like I said, we've been a part of a lot of meals, a lot of drinks, a lot of great times for 150 years. We want to keep that going. We want to be a part of even more great times for the next 150 years.
Tabasco, Tabasco, the original liquid pepper seasoning.
You can see the bottling facility in action yourself every day from 9 to 4, except holidays. It is truly fascinating. And still ahead. The birds saved here from extinction, and the plant life recently discovered living on Avery Island and nowhere else in America, as Weekends with Whitney continues.
Look at this guy. You seeing this? Well, I'm the human dislike button, and I see it too.
Not on my watch, Hondo.
This guy's breaking like 5 rules. Don't be this guy. I'm the human dislike button, but one thing I do like is following the rules. To learn more about me, go to breck.org/HDB.
Welcome back to Weekends with Whitney. Tabasco sauce is just one of the amazing things found here on Avery Island. The others are the plants and wildlife. "170 acres of Avery Island are the Jungle Gardens, a bird and plant reserve created in the late 1800s by John Simmons' great-great-grandfather.
E.A. McIlhenny was a conservationist before that was something that people even thought about.
He's single-handedly credited with saving the snowy egret from extinction by building this 35-acre rookery. He named it Bird City. He showed how a private citizen could use his own land to make significant contributions in conservation. It was Louisiana's first wildlife preserve. The country took notice. President Teddy Roosevelt called Bird City the most noteworthy reserve in the United States. McIlhenny later opened Jungle Gardens to the public.
I think about him is up until the Jungle Gardens opened in 1935, that was just his backyard. It was where he went and tinkered. That's pretty cool, and I think that's pretty extraordinary. The business of making Tabasco sauce was for him a part-time vocation because he dedicated so much of his time to being a naturalist and a conservationist.
He was wild about wildlife. He bottle-fed this Louisiana black bear. He was equally intrigued with alligators.
He wrote a book on alligators that was probably wrong at some parts, but it was a really thoughtful look at observational alligator behavior. He wrote extensively about birds. He wrote extensively about the flora and fauna of Avery Island around us. And I think that's really encapsulated in the jungle gardens.
Botanist and former UL professor Gary Landry says McIlhenny was a true naturalist.
He had his hands in everything from birds to mammals to reptiles and plants. I mean, you know, he worked with migratory waterfowl, so there wasn't anything McIlhenny didn't attempt and work with. And of course, they were so well connected. You know, he was friends with the Roosevelts and with Fairchild at the Smithsonian, so many things came this way because of all those connections.
For the last 2 years, Gary's collected and identified plants throughout the gardens previously lost throughout history.
That's the interesting thing about jungle gardens. While McIlhenny had several helpers who might have known what the plants were and where they were, nobody wrote it down. They kept it here, and then they've all gone. There was no knowledge of what was out there. I mean, everyone knew that he liked bamboos, he liked hollies, he liked camellias. So those three cultivated plants the garden is well known for, but there's a ton of other stuff that people completely overlooked.
He's made some amazing discoveries. Plants never before found in Louisiana or the U.S.
We have 2 huge specimens of the Asian sweet gum, okay? Now that wouldn't excite most people because sweet gums are all over the place, but not Asian sweet gums. We have 2 huge ones in the gardens.
When National Arboretum Director Richard Olson visited the gardens, he identified something rarer, a hybrid of the Asian and native one.
He said that's never been discovered in the wild. It's only known from cultivation where it's been, produced. So these are the first ones ever documented as occurring naturally.
McIlhenny had a lot of exotic plants, thanks to his friend at the Smithsonian, botanist David Fairchild. He had connections throughout the Orient.
As plants came in, some were specifically designated to come straight to Avery Island. So McIlhenny received all these things that were being brought in by USDA around the turn of the century.
The Chinese plum plant was another huge find for Gary.
It's a small shrub that produces a very tasty blueberry-like fruit in the spring. It's never been reported in Louisiana. The only report for the entire U.S. is one area in Texas, and it's all over Avery Island. It's everywhere. So a new state record, and I can tell you that it's birds that are spreading it because the fruit is so tasty.
McIlhenny planted 64 varieties of bamboo in jungle gardens. It's one of the oldest timber bamboo groves in America.
These are the ones that came up this year.
Wow, they get that big one year.
Well, no, here's the thing. They come out of the ground the size they are. If it's this big, it comes out of the ground that big. They don't increase in size this way at all. The size you see is the size it came out of the ground.
That's crazy.
And they just get taller, but not bigger around.
It feels like velvet. Feels like a jewelry box.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Until last winter, no one thought the island had any ginkgo trees.
You see that wall of shrubs right there?
Uh-huh.
Imagine that wall extending all the way this way and connecting with that wall, so that those 2 trees were totally obscured by this wall of shrubbery. But when I walked that path, I saw the ground covered with these leaves. So I knew we had ginkgo trees, and I walked into the woods. Now I had to walk about 7 or 8 feet, and I discovered these towering trees, which until then had been invisible because of everything in front of them.
We found the ground covered covered with edible ginkgo seeds.
They weren't particularly tasty,
Okay.
but I think, you know, with a little Tabasco sauce, they'd be delicious.
One sweltering day last summer, Gary found a treasure inside.
I decided to actually go through the archives where there are thousands of folders, manila folders, with receipts for everything McIlhenny ever did. I came across a letter from the Yokohama Nursery in Yokohama, Japan, dated November 24th, 1919. The last entry on the list was a rare tree that I found in the gardens that's growing there today. Oh. So it'll be 100 years next year that this plant has been in the gardens. That's what's going to be so exciting, if we can actually find documentation for all of the rare things that I've found.
Gary also discovered a record-breaking brush holly.
According to Adam Black, who's a well-known botanist, these are perhaps the largest ones in the U.S.
Gary recently created a brochure for visitors, mapping where rare plants are located, a list that keeps growing.
I've at least found 2 woody plants that have never been reported for Louisiana. So the 2 new state records growing here. In all my years of being a botanist, the last 2 years have perhaps been some of the most illuminating.
Jungle Gardens is filled with eye-catching, surprising things. Some, like Buddha, are easy to see. Others remain a mystery. The Jungle Gardens are full of surprises. Like, I really didn't expect to be standing here and there be an alligator this close to me. Luckily, I think we spotted each other about the same time. But like Avery Island itself, the Jungle Gardens are always full of surprises and certainly worth your time to come visit. They're open every day except holidays from 9 to 4. And still ahead, more of nature's beauty tucked away on Avery Island as Weekends with Whitney continues. Atlas Foundation Repair, fixing your foundation problems for more than 30 years while preserving and protecting your trees. Whitney, we hope to see you back here again next week. Until then, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until then, we leave you with more beauty of Avery Island. Welcome to Weekends with Whitney. That was the huge alligator that made like a plunge.